we're going to kick this episode off. Matt, you and I have had a couple of conversations at this point, and all of our mutuals have described us as being very similar. So I'm excited for our conversation and getting into the accessibility stuff today. But why don't you start with letting everyone know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Matt Philipenko. I'm a senior customer solutions architect at Microsoft. Our other kind of code name and fun name is the M365 Apps Rangers. We focus on Office deployment, updates, activation, and install, uninstall, like all of those kind of admin scenarios for Office. And then outside of that, I do a ton of accessibility work. It's not part of my core responsibility, but each Microsoft employee has a diversity and inclusion basically spot on our profile at work, and we're urged and kind of motivated to tap into D&I if it's diversity and inclusion, accessibility, any one of those kind of areas. But my main job is to do admin work with a bunch of big S500, S2500, like the big corporate commercial type customers, and it's a lot of fun.
It sounds like it. I'm not at that scale yet. Hopefully one day. So getting into your accessibility background, how did that all come about for you? My story's a little bit interesting. I just kind of haphazardly found my way into it. So it's always interesting to hear how other people got into the accessibility space.
Yeah. So for me, it was like I was working at Microsoft and just going along with my day, doing my thing. And then I started to, I was going on site with a customer one time, and the customer, I had to do some PowerPoint stuff, and was having trouble seeing it because my mouse broke. And then my old manager said, hey, he kind of empowered me and said, hey, if you ever sense that tension ever again from another customer, feel free to just bail on it. Just go back to the hotel, fly home. And he basically said, if they're going to make you feel uncomfortable because of a disability, just leave. And they weren't making me feel uncomfortable. At the end of the day, it was my fault because I just didn't fess up. I didn't open my mouth and talk to them. But the learning at that moment was really, it set a fire of like, wow, they've got my back. They're definitely here to help me, and it just, that kind of like spearheaded everything to happen.
That's very cool. Yeah, and it's always empowering when I do trainings and when I work with people within the disability community to get into the accessibility space. That's always one of the conversations we have is if the company isn't empowering you, if they're trying to shy away from specific conversations, that might be a telltale sign that maybe that's not a company you want to work for. And so I always try to lean into the conversation of culture within the workplace. And it's super cool to hear companies like Microsoft are doing that. And I think that's kind of the storyline around the accessibility space, is that there are this handful of companies that are sort of spearheading or leading the charge. They're setting the stage. And Microsoft is always in that conversation. There's the other two big names. We won't mention them, but there's kind of three companies that are in this circle of what is the standard for accessibility? What is the standard for empowering your staff and your employees and your people? And so it's always fascinating to learn about the different ways that comes about, whether it's a side conversation after a presentation that went a little bit sideways, or it was in the interview process. It's always coming out in different ways. And so it's not really a straightforward conversation all the time.
Yeah. The thing I love about it is that it's an empowering thing where, like at Microsoft, we have a core team that is focused on accessibility. And we have accessibility evangelists. Lori Allen's one of them. She's a good friend of mine. Jenny's our chief accessibility officer. Like, so we make a big dent in accessibility, and we have people with like specific roles and responsibilities. But there are thousands and thousands of employees that do accessibility because of lived experiences, and that's kind of in the bucket that I'm in. Like I have access to all of our accessibility teams. I know a bunch of the engineering teams. So it's like the best of both worlds, because I mean there's super cool stuff that I get to mess with, and before it releases to market, and we get to like test it out and say, yep, this is working for me, or no, this is not working for me. The contrast is off, or I can't play it with like narrator. I can't read it. Like I can't. There's no text to speech or something like that. So it's a pretty cool opportunity to be in.
You're just kind of in a big sandbox, it sounds like, with a lot of the accessibility stuff that's coming down the pipeline. And so our last conversation, we were talking about some of the things that you were working on or playing around with. There was a couple of them that you mentioned. I don't know what you're able to share, but what you are able to share, what are some of those exciting things for you that are coming down the pipeline or that recently released out of the suite of Microsoft products and services?
Yeah, so we've definitely we're releasing stuff all the time. So the biggest motivator for every single company, every single person using Office, we call Office now as Microsoft 365 apps, is like the code or the core name of it, rather than Office. But like the recommendation would be to have either, like, if you're a consumer, be on current channel. If you work at an enterprise or a company, make sure that you're running monthly enterprise channel. Those two channels of Office are going to be updated on a faster cadence and more predictable for the monthly enterprise channel. But what it does is it empowers companies to give users their features that they need when they need them, and as soonest availability. So it's like super cool. So that's like kind of the first phase. But as far as features coming out, I've been working with our accessibility team and testing out a new feature. It's been an existing product piece called the accessibility checker inside Office, but the new one is called the accessibility assistant. And what it does is it overlays. Have you used the editor feature inside Microsoft Word?
Yeah.
So like, you know how like editor will walk you through like action steps, like, all right, you've got grammar issues, there's 6, and misspelled words, you have 4. Like it like knocks out those, and then you basically go through like an accordion type style flow, knock them out, and then pass that section, and then your editor score goes up when you complete those. So it's the same kind of similar experience with the accessibility assistant, but it's a lot more automated in a fashion of, like, if I'm in a Word doc and I'm creating something in like, let's say my background is white and my my heading in my document is like a bright yellow or something like that, to where the contrast is off.
Yeah.
It's not a proper contrast. So what it will do is, on the canvas, it will drop this accessibility icon, the same icon we use for all of our accessibility stuff, all of our logos and things like that. It drops that on the canvas. So it's right there on the left-hand side margin inside Word. And what's cool about that is it's going to it'll move its way through the other apps as well. But the benefit here is, now, instead of previously with the accessibility checker, the issues would be in there, but we would never, we wouldn't be able to get in front of the user as much as we are with the assistant. With the checker, down at the bottom of the screen, there was like an accessibility investigate button. So if somebody saw that and they clicked on it, would launch the accessibility checker, and then they could dig into it.
Yeah.
But with this accessibility assistant, the benefit is it will drop that accessibility icon on the canvas, very similar to, like, if you misspell a word, or you have grammar issues inside your document and you get like the little squiggly lines. That's the similar approach. So what will happen is you click on that icon if you get one, and then it'll pop up and it'll say, hey, this text right here, and it will like sub highlight the area that's in question, and it will say this is improper contrast, and then it will offer you um, options inside the color palette that are the proper contrast for that item. And you can just pick one of those. And then once you pick one, it will change the contrast automatically on that heading, and the accessibility icon goes away.
Two things for that. One, I don't think most of us in the professional setting would be where we are today without spell check and grammar check. I am one of them. I always say I am terrible when it comes to writing. If I didn't have spell check or grammar check, I would not be in the position that I am today. But the second piece to that I really love is that you're sort of bringing it out from behind the curtain. When you look at accessibility, whether it's in a content management system like WordPress, or you're posting a picture on Instagram, or a lot of these authoring tools, things like adding alt text to images are marketed or placed in as optional. And that's how they appear. It's like, oh, this is just another field that I could fill in. It's not required or anything like that. And that has been like a challenge to overcome in training people about accessibility best practices. And what I love about this update of bringing it right into the canvas is that it brings it out from behind that curtain and puts it right in front of the user. It doesn't come across as an optional thing, because we're not going to leave misspelled words or grammatical errors within our professional documents. And now with it being in the forefront, we're also not going to leave accessibility issues in there. We're going to just, when we go through and clean up our document at the end or in the middle or whatever, that's just going to become a part of that process more than likely. And I think that's what a lot of these other authoring tools need to implement and adopt. And going back to Microsoft being one of the leaders in the charge, it's super cool and it's super exciting to see that sort of starting to happen. Because I've worked in a lot of these different content management systems, social media platforms, authoring tools, different things like that. And accessibility just kind of seems like an optional thing. It doesn't really seem like it's that important or it's required, or it's just kind of like, oh, if I have the time, I'll do it. It's never really been put at the forefront like that. So I am super excited to get my hands on the assistant and see how it works and what all it can pick up. I'm a tinkerer, so that's what I do, is I play around with these things and I see what they can do, so that when other people ultimately come to me and ask questions or ask for advice or training or whatever, I know how to direct them. I know the expected behaviors and things like that to come out of it. So super excited for that. Are there anything that you can share from like a general Windows perspective? I know that there's all these accessibility features built into the Windows operating system now, whether it's color filters or increasing your cursor, narrator. There's all of this built into them. Is there any updates coming down the pipeline from the user perspective in terms of making their experiences more accessible without relying on the organization?
So with Windows 11, there's a bunch. We have new contrast themes that are coming out. If somebody's not on Windows 11, they won't see those yet. We also have voice access that's pretty sweet. The magnifier reader was out previously, but there's just a ton of benefits there. My favorite thing, most of all, about the Windows 11 stuff is we're shipping the new natural voices for narrator automatically. So if somebody needs a natural voice, like I switched mine yesterday, because it's like if you've used voiceover, you've heard Mark, and it's like hello, blah blah, like it's like super robotic, and it's like I just can't stand it. So I have mine set to these new natural voices, and it's so much more easy to understand it and hear it as it's being read to me.
Yeah, I'm excited for the natural voices. Playing around with all the different screen readers that are out there, it does tend to get a little bit dry, is the way I describe it. And I've even started to mess with like my friends and family. Like I have my Siri set to an Australian accent, and so when they
Sorry, I don't understand.
there she goes. when they call and get my voicemail, the accent throws them off, and it's little subtle things like that I like to do just to mess with people a little bit. But the natural voices, I think, are needed, and it will give more of a human feel to the assistive technology world, and whereas a lot of people think of it as very foreign or sort of unexpected, I guess would be the word. A lot of people, when you show them a screen reader for the first time, it's exciting, but it's equally a little bit jarring, because a lot of us that use screen readers have our speed turned way up, and so it doesn't really even sound like English coming out of a robotic tone or voice. So excited for that. As far as the color filters go, I've played around with a lot of them that are on the Windows 11. Are those new color filters geared more towards like specific types of color blindness or low vision, or what's kind of been the methodology behind the new color filters?
Like the reason behind each one of them, I tend
I'm
to
just
just
curious, like,
night sky.
yeah, I'm just curious, like the thought process
Okay.
or audiences. Yeah, I can hear you. Just
Yeah. For me, I mean, I use the night sky one most of the time, just because I like really deep and high contrast. But I get by primarily just with the dark mode inside Windows 11. 100%. That's where I'm at all the time, unless there's an app that or like a meeting or something like that, or a website that's like really bright and white. I'll turn on the contrast themes, that night sky theme, just to force the website to go into a high contrast mode, just because sometimes they're like super bright, and it's just too bright to try to even see it.
Yeah, and that I'm in the same position. I'm dark mode. Any website or app that I download, I'm always trying to see if there's a dark mode theme or an option for it. If not, I'm going back to the Windows system settings or the iPhone settings to turn it on myself. And so I was curious if there were new ones coming in that were aimed at different levels of contrast or different color combinations or anything like that.
Yeah, no, not at the time. I mean, there's, I mean, what I've done with a bunch of mine, the night sky, it's like a yellow tone to it, so I've turned that off on mine, just because the yellow is too bright. And that's another thing I like about the new. I think you could probably do it with the old system as well, but with this new one, I'm able to um, basically configure my own custom theme with and then you can go through and configure every single aspect, like the text, the hyperlinks, the backgrounds, the canvas, and I mean everything can be configured.
Gotcha. Absolutely. 100% agree. And so, um, to sort of round things off with this conversation, from your perspective, working in one of the big three that are leading the way, or sort of setting the stage in accessibility, what are some of the things that you're seeing or hearing about or following, that some of these other organizations, small, medium, large, should put on their radars as well? What would be your sort of advice to the other organizations?
So I think my top one, that I found last week, we released. You've probably heard of Copilot already. If you haven't, you've been probably living under a rock. Um, and our Copilot stuff that we have out there is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, it from a disability and inclusion or an accessibility tool. A lot of people think of it just as like this advanced thing to create content, to do different things. But um, on mine, I had, so for an example, I had a PowerPoint that my team put together. And it was mainly made for us speaking to big IT admins at these companies. And it was really good. I mean, the content was good. The pictures were good. Like it was very visually stimulating, but I ran the accessibility checker and there was almost 200 errors inside of it. And I was like, man, that's a lot of issues. And I was like, man, how am I going to go fix all these before this meeting? So I was like, I should throw this thing at Copilot, because I've heard of a few people internally messing with Copilot about summarizing the deck. So I launched Copilot, and then I told Copilot, summarize the PowerPoint presentation. And I knew what was in the presentation, so I knew what a person needed to get out of it. So I said summarize, and it went through all of the slides, all of the notes, basically went through the whole deck and spit out like a phenomenal response of like a summarization of the whole deck. And then it offered me two more questions, and the other questions it offered me was based on the content that was in there. So I was able to say, like we talked about monthly channel and a monthly enterprise channel and current channel earlier. And in there, we were talking about the different channels, and it one of the responses and the prompts was, what are the Microsoft 365 app channels? And then I clicked on that one, and it brought back the exact definitions. Like, it was absolutely perfect. And then the second prompt that it offered was, why is monthly enterprise good for an enterprise? And it dumped that one out. And those weren't pre-defined prompts. Those weren't pre-built on my end. I basically just said, summarize this content or summarize this PowerPoint. And it crushed it, hit it out of the park. So I think from a futuristic, the best thing going forward is going to be Copilot. I mean, not to mention the summarization features, but when I would go to meetings, I would have to take notes all the time. And now I don't even take notes. Copilot will summarize my meeting when I get done. If I show up late to a meeting, like if I'm 20 minutes late, 30 minutes late, I'm hopefully I'm never that late to a meeting, but sometimes I'm like 5 or 10 minutes late, just because if one call goes, usually all the other calls for the rest of the day snowball.
Yeah.
So
I know how that goes.
Oh, it's terrible. Yeah. So when that happens though, I'll join the Teams call. I'll jump in, and then immediately Copilot will pop up, and I like ask me, hey, do you want me to catch you up? And it'll basically offer what everybody's talked about since the meeting started until I joined. It'll give me a heads up of everything.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are intimidated by the concept of AI and machine learning and all of this virtual assistance. And a lot of people, I don't think, have come around to the idea of just how much AI and all of this new technology can benefit from an accessibility lens. And I've had multiple conversations. Me and you might have to do a second one of these just to talk about how AI helps with accessibility. I've had these conversations, and I've been asked dozens of questions that follow up from it, and it does snowball sort of out of control pretty quickly. But I think you just gave like a perfect example of, it took a slide deck that was not accessible, and it was able to pull out all of the essential information and deliver it in an accessible format.
Yeah.
And I think that principle is what a lot of other accessibility companies and assistive technology companies are aiming to do. And when you work with things like Copilot, and there's other ones out there, right? ChatGPT 4, there's now all of this stuff coming out about Gemini and all of that it can do for you. And I don't think people are really looking at it through that accessibility lens, which it's 100% there. It just hasn't been brought to light yet. So we more than likely are going to have to do another one of these. AI and accessibility.
Yeah, even the AI and accessibility, like during that AI session, we can even bring up and talk through the Florence model for alt text. So our old models that we use for alt text, Microsoft has a feature inside PowerPoint and Outlook and Word will automatically generate alt text for you if you have that turned on. And the old setup, like I can visualize a picture. So if you visualize a sewing machine with thread running through it, and then it's sewing on a piece of leather.
Yeah.
So I have a picture like that. And the leather was brown, and the old model said it's a piece of wood. And I was like, what? I mean, that's not even close. And
Yeah.
then the new model that we're running it against said a sewing machine with white thread stitching leather. And it was just like absolutely to a T perfect. And then there's a ton of other samples in a bunch of the content that I present all the time, with scenarios like that. But
Yeah.
that's using AI as well, and Azure and machine learning, and just really understanding how we can make the technology work for us versus like, because earlier we talked about like the accessibility assistant, and I it's going to be hard to change like people's behaviors. People are just used to grabbing a PowerPoint, going into other PowerPoints, copying slides, pasting into that one, and just makeshifting, like just slapping these together. And when they do that, and when it's all said and done, I would say 75% of it's inaccessible. And or if a PowerPoint was created by a graphics artist for a company, and it was never made accessible at that point, but now they've built on top of it, and it's like a fundamental part of the business, they can't change it. Like it's really hard for them to go back and change it.
Yeah.
So using AI to solve for that and just say, nope, okay, I get it. It's not accessible, but now tell me about it. And but yeah, there's a ton of stuff we could go on. I mean, uh, I'd love to do a session sometime on seeing AI. We just released a new feature called Find My Things. Do you use the Seeing AI app?
Yep. It's right on my home screen on my phone.
Sweet. Yeah. So in this latest update, they're under the world mode. There's a new feature in there called Find My Things, and it is super rad. You basically, um, like I upstairs in our living room, I took my remote and we run through like the scan process. It'll talk to you and tell you how to do it when you open it.
Yeah.
But you basically save these items or these objects in your home, and then when you're looking for them, you go to that list and you can click on remote, TV remote, and then the camera opens and you move your phone around the room, and it will, when it sees it, it'll start beeping, making noises, and then it has like this arrow that is pointing towards it. So if you're holding your phone up close, or if you're totally blind, it'll making a tone. But basically, as you get closer to the object, the tone is changing, and then when you get really, really close, like within a foot, it changes, and then it makes like this completion notice, and then you're right there by it. But I mean, I tested that thing. I mean, I was standing up I was on it before we released it to general availability. I was on it on a beta copy, and I was upstairs tossing my remote all over the living room, just geeking out, figuring out that it could find it every single time.
No, that sounds fascinating. I'm gonna have to test that out over the weekend. Hopefully, uh, hopefully you don't lose your phone though.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So it's
Cool. Well,
pretty cool stuff.
Well, I think it's safe to say this is part one of a series between you and I on accessibility in the tech space, whether it's in the Microsoft products and suite of different products, or AI, or apps and technology. I would love to continue this conversation, but I don't want to eat up too much of your Friday afternoon. So we can call it there. I appreciate you jumping on and pulling back the curtain a little bit to what Microsoft has going on from an accessibility standpoint, and sharing your thoughts and insights as well. So I look forward to a part two, an episode two, whatever we end up calling it. But just appreciate you jumping on and having a conversation. It's always fascinating, especially when we've been compared to each other multiple times now. So just appreciated it and everything else.
Yeah, 100% happy to jump on again anytime. And then for any of the listeners too, if you need help, just reach out. I've jumped on so many calls and so many emails. Like I think Sam Seavey, the Blind Life on YouTube, he's got, I mean, all of his comments have my email address like spattered throughout it, just because I'm just more than happy to jump in. If I know my biggest thing is if you or I or someone else knows the answer to something and we're not sharing it, like it's wrong. So like you got keys to unlock something, you better be sharing it.
Yeah, that's a perfect thing to end on. We love Sam, and that's what this whole series is about: is sharing the information, kind of unlocking the door and letting it out there for anybody who wants or needs it or is looking for it. So I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your Friday afternoon. Just thank you again.
You too. Thanks for the invite. Have a good day.
Thank you.